Hey guys, it's Gary again. There's a lot of me been coming around lately, huh? Anyway, looking for my Don Cherry and Oregon vinyls that are lost, I guess. I'm going through the bins. Found a bunch of my Mark Isham CDs. I really only have one or two albums by him on vinyl. And thought, well, you know what? I'll do a Mark Isham one. I am quite a fan of his work, especially going back into the, well, actually when he started with this one. One of those early signings to Windham Hill, when the Windham Hill label started in the early 80s. I don't know how they found out about him. He didn't have solo albums out at this point. But he recorded an album called Vapor Drawings, which I think anybody that's interested in quote-unquote new age music, is aware of the scene of what was going on in the early 80s, probably knows and loves this album. This is definitely a classic of the genre. More so probably than anything else he's done. Not by any fault of his. It just kind of fits the mode. It's very keyboard-oriented. And even though he's primarily a trumpet player, but he plays all kinds of keyboards on here, piano and synthesizers. It doesn't actually list it, does it? Oh yeah. He even plays soprano sax, flugelhorn on here. He plays the electronic wind instrument as well, and electronic percussion. And there's only one other musician on here, so this is one of those solo kind of albums that I like, where one musician is playing most of the stuff. And he has got a drummer. He's got Peter Van Hook, who plays snare drum and electronic percussion, according to what it says here. So there's not 99% of the stuff is coming from Isham, and there's some drum stuff from Peter Van Hook, and excellent album. I can't believe anybody that doesn't already know the new age scene at all wouldn't be familiar at least with this album. That was a classic, and the only reason he probably doesn't have more classics is because, fortunately for him and unfortunately for us, he got very involved in the music soundtrack scene, and he's done so many soundtracks you can't even keep up with them. I don't know how he does it. And I have this huge stack of CDs, and I'm like, oh, I'll bring these CDs and I'll show my Mark Isham collection. And going through them, it just came across my mind that, wow, there's some CDs I know of his that I have from movie soundtracks that aren't even here. And I got a whole bunch here. So I can imagine what else I've got of his that, is spread out in another bin somewhere, which will just go to show you how much stuff he's done. He really started doing soundtracks in the early 80s, probably around 83 or so, and has never stopped doing them since then. In some cases TV movies, theatrical movies, big budget movies, big deal stuff, and I don't even know if you could attempt to get all of his soundtrack stuff. I would buy them as I came across them, usually when they first come out. I was a nut, I bought this one on vinyl, which I don't have here, but there's a movie which I've never saw, an American comedy called Maid in Heaven. It's a comedy about a maid, apparently. And just to go show you at the time, that would have been probably the mid to late 80s, I was such a nut buying his stuff that I bought that album, even though 90% of the album is a bunch of pop tunes that I have no interest in. I never even played them once. And I think he contributed all of 8 minutes to the soundtrack album, and I went and I paid full price for it anyway. And that's really the only one that I have on album that I don't have on CD, simply because when it came available, it was hard to justify spending about $17 or $18 to get that 8 minutes of music that he did on that soundtrack, even though there was a couple neat little tunes there. But I actually asked for Vapor Drawings as a Christmas present, got it. I was already in my 20s when this came out, but instead of we still, in my family, we did that for years, where just, what do you want for Christmas kind of thing, and I still do it with my sister to this day. So instead of just buying stuff that they may not like or want, it's like, just tell me what you want, I'll get it kind of thing. So I got that. I knew I would like it, and I did. And subsequently, pretty much right after that, I think that Made in Heaven soundtrack thing. I don't know why I bought that on vinyl, because pretty much I love this album so much, Vapor Drawings, that I just a couple years later I bought the CD. Didn't even wait. Mark had a very, I guess Vapor Drawings was probably a fairly big album for him, but right at that time that Vapor Drawings came out, he really caught on in the soundtrack world. And when it was time to come up with a follow-up for Windham Hill, he was busy. And so what Windham Hill did, instead of I was going to say real solo album, but this is a solo. What they did is they came out, their next Windham Hill release was something called Film Music, which is music from 3 different soundtracks that he did, 83, 84, and 85. One is kind of like I think it was like a documentary, because it's only 8.5 minutes, the Times of Harvey Milk, which was a documentary about a real life person, and a Disney movie, Never Cry Wolf, which is about 25 minutes on here, and Mrs. Soffel, which was a big budget movie from 84, 85. It's got about 14 minutes of here. But this Never Cry Wolf theme, I don't know how familiar people are with soundtrack works. Many soundtrack albums only have the music that appeared in the movie. So if you have a composer that did a soundtrack and you buy the soundtrack, very often what you'll get are a lot of tracks that run like a minute and a half, a minute long, and very short. And what it is they're just composing strictly for the length of the scene that they need. So a lot of times something will take off and it's really beautiful, or it's got a rhythm or a groove to it or something, and you're getting into it and it ends. And the reason it ends is because that's all they needed for the film. And so a lot of soundtrack albums, a lot of them, consist of just the music cues that were used in the film. And it's a little frustrating. I was listening to one today, as a matter of fact, from Isham. And it was a very similar thing. There's a whole bunch of rhythmic things in there, and they start in a nice groove to them, and then all of a sudden they fade out. And you know that if those same tunes were written for a regular album to listen to, that they would have gone on for another 4 or 5 minutes and had solos in them and stuff like that. So soundtrack music can be very frustrating, and it's not, when you're into a composer, it's not always the best way to hear their stuff. If they've got proper, quote-unquote, proper albums out. This one is really an exception, and you know what? You could play this for somebody, or even for yourself, not know that this was music for films, and that simply because he took all the music, apparently, for each individual film, and basically, especially the Never Cry Wolf thing, which is almost 25 minutes, it's like a big, long suite, and you're not getting that choppy minute here, a minute and a half there, 2 minutes, 50-second cues here. It all flows into each other, and there's almost no minutes that you would even guess that this is soundtrack. There's only one moment when there's a whole lot of quiet stuff in one of the pieces, and all of a sudden it breaks into a very loud, wild drum section, which you could tell was obviously, and I've never seen any of these movies, obviously done to contrast a scene where there was some kind of tender, quiet things going on, or reflective things, and all of a sudden some kind of action of some type happened, or fast movement or something. But that part still works musically. And if you didn't know this was a soundtrack album, it still works as a music album, and that's quite rare, actually. In a lot of soundtracks, you listen to them in a compromised fashion, knowing that some things are there simply for a length of time because that's what the movie called for, and it doesn't bid well for the piece being as developed as it could have been. But this is fantastic, and I was slightly hesitant to buy this, but I was so into Vapor Drawings, and there was absolutely nothing else of his at the time to get, that I took a chance on this, and especially the Never Cry Wolf 25-minute thing in here, which he's got. It's not solo stuff. It's him with the whole orchestra of people and percussionists and guitarists and incredible. This is a really good album that works on its own. Not too many soundtracks do. And as the years went on, from the 80s on, Mark did a lot of soundtracks. And I'm kind of going to skip over some of the soundtracks now and focus on his solo albums, which are the things, those are the things that you really wait for when you're into an artist like this. But Vapor Drawings coming out about in '83, the film music compilation, which again is film music, it's not an album, but it works as a regular music album. When did this come out? Probably, I want to say, probably 86 or late 85 that came out. Mark also did, Windham Hill record label had this sub-label. It was a kids thing called Rabbit Ears, and it was stories on tape or on CD or even record, I think, of children's stories. Usually celebrities reading children's stories. In this case, who reads it? Glenn Close reads this story, The Emperor and the Nightingale. And as a bonus for music fans, because they knew that if they put it on here, I would buy it, they, after the story itself, which is a 38-minute story, that Mark Isham wrote the music, the accompanying music to, that goes underneath the story that Glenn Close is reading. After the 38-minute story, they isolate almost 20 minutes of just music, without the narration, without the story, that Isham created, and it's the music that plays underneath the story while the story's going on. And this is, again, very inventive music. And I bought this and, again, paid full price for this thing just to get that almost 20 minutes of music that Isham did unaccompanied by the story. And like I said, the music plays underneath the story as well, but kind of like as a CD bonus, and for the fans like myself that really want to hear Mark Isham music, they just did a 20-minute track of the music. And this was 87. And Isham was already involved at this point in a ton of soundtracks. But so that was pretty much his next thing that he did for the Windham Hill label. And he also did the soundtrack. Now in '89, he also did another thing for the Windham Hill label that is kind of almost a solo album too. This was not a TV or theatrical film soundtrack. It was a video soundtrack, and these kind of got popular at the time, and videotapes were, a relatively new thing. Laser discs were out long before the DVD era, and Windham Hill also got an idea, in addition, to branch out and to do some videos that were basically scenic things, and in this case, scenes of Tibet. Without any kind of narration. It's not a movie, it's not a story, strictly scenic things. And they asked Mark Isham to do the soundtrack. And this has a 1989 date on it, but I think I know it took a while for this to actually come out on CD, because I don't think, I'm not sure, maybe it was, I don't know. I thought it took a while for it to come out, because I remember the Laserdisc being out, and there was no CD at the time, and the videotape of Tibet coming out, where he did the soundtrack, and I don't remember the soundtrack coming out for a while. It took maybe, I tend to think it took a year or two for it to come out. And it's about 48 minutes. And it's exactly the soundtrack to the film, to the video. Like I said, there's no story. There's a couple narrative points where somebody comes in and is speaking a few lines for a few minutes. But it's kind of mixed down low, and it's actually on the record as well, on the CD. But it's a really good piece of music. It doesn't necessarily develop. There's a lot of longer sections of the piece. It's all Tibet parts 1 through 5, and about 48 minutes total. But it's very good. It establishes a mood. Most of the 5 individual parts, once they establish the mood, they kind of sit there for the duration of the piece. But it's nice. It's not not as developed maybe in terms of intentionally so in terms of like Vapor Drawings, which is a real solo album, or even the album called Film Music that was prior to this, where there's a lot going on musically there. But this is definitely probably also considered one of his classics because it kind of fits in the new age genre. I mean, I hate to use that term because I don't mean it in a disparaging way. New age, as it was in the 80s when it started out, it was a music of a lot of possibilities and a lot of things that couldn't be classified as something else, especially instrumental music, ended up falling up under new age. So it wasn't just like lounging around and listening to nature sounds or just hot tub music that was meant to be ignored. It wasn't that at all. But to get on with Mr. Isham, he had recorded with Art Landy, a piano player, as part of Art Landy's band prior to establishing his solo career, and he's maintained for years, I guess, a friendship and a musical working relationship with Art. And the same year, January of '87, as some of his other stuff, he actually, this is my stickers on there, he recorded a duet album, just him and Art Landy, whereas prior he had been a member of Art Landy's band, which was a quartet. And these two guys just went in and recorded this album, which I love that cover, which is what I'm going to show it to you, called We Begin. And this was something that was recorded in January '87 for ECM. So he went back to ECM Records, and I guess at that point didn't have an exclusive contract with Windham Hill or whatever. But this is probably, might even be a little more of an Art Landy album than a Mark Isham album. And you get the listening to this. There's some really fine pieces on there, but I think quite a lot of them sound like they may have been improvised in the studio. But it's a very moody, not very much like his other works, and that could be the Art Landy part in there. But it was kind of like it seemed like they were set on wanting to explore something else, and it's just the two of them. Art Landy's playing piano, synthesizer, percussion, and Mark is playing trumpet, flugelhorn, synthesizer, and percussion. Good album, a little difficult to get into. Maybe a good starting point, and for lovers of more kind of adventurous music, even took me a while to get into it. But to continue the thread of Isham's solo career and how he often went years without making a proper solo album because his soundtrack work was so prolific. He signed, very surprisingly and quite oddly, with Virgin Records in 1990. This is the only, I keep putting stickers on here for my own references. In 1990, he signed with Virgin Records. Pretty sure, no, you know what? There's another album that I don't have here that he recorded 2 albums. Pretty sure the other one too was for Virgin. I'm looking at this stuff and now I'm recalling the ones that are missing from this pile. But he recorded for Virgin Records. I gotta admit, that from this point on, his solo albums kind of took a little bit of a different direction, and I much prefer the prior ones that I showed you as far as solo albums go. This has a lot of good, but a lot of shorter tunes on here. He's got a band with drummer and bass and guitar and stuff like that. But there's like 2 vocal songs on here too, including that old song Blue Moon. He even does a version of that with the female vocalist. And it's like, it seems like more than a coincidence that he signed to a major label and all of a sudden he's starting to put vocal tracks on his albums. He did another one, and it's not here. And I'm pretty sure it was for Virgin, and that was not as compromised, I think. It was all instrumental, very similar musically, but a bit more advanced, I think, called Castaglia, I think was the name of it. Or is that the name of one of the tracks? I don't know, and I just realized now that I don't have it here. But that had to have also been done at around the same time, This was 90. That might have been 89 or 91. I can't remember. I think Estivali might have even come before. I'm not sure. And I'm surprised I missed that one because he doesn't have that many solo albums. But I have it. I just don't have it here. And it took a really long time for Mark after that point, those Virgin albums. It was probably about another 5 years before he did another solo album because his soundtrack work was so prolific. There's an album called Blue Sun, and this is Mark very much in a mainstream jazz vein. So he's dropping the synthesizers. He's got a band that's it does have electric bass, but apart from that, it's pretty acoustically oriented. Kurt Workman on drums, Steve Travaglione on tenor saxophone, acoustic pianist, and Mark sticking to the trumpets. It says electronics too, but there's very little electronics in here. And it's a pure jazz album. It's quite good. It's just that, for me, Mark Isham really established something with Vapor Drawings and even film music, the Windham Hill album film music, which is just, incredible stuff. And, this is not, they're good. They're good. And I don't say, I'm kind of damning them and saying that these aren't great albums, but they are. But they're just not the areas maybe I would prefer to see him work in. It took him quite a few years. He's still doing the soundtrack thing. 1999, another 4-year gap before he came out with the Silent Way project. This is, again, just like the prior album was kind of like a dedication stylistically of a mainstream jazz thing. This is original tunes, again, by an assembled band of his, but that specifically were making music in the mold of Miles Davis, Silent Way, Bitches Brew era. I love In a Silent Way, but Miles kind of lost me with Bitches Brew. It was too rock oriented for me. And the Bitches Brew stuff, the percussion section was just, it was like repeatedly the same thing, and there was like very little dynamics there. And this is pretty good because In a Silent Way, which came out, the Miles Davis album, prior to Bitches Brew, was a little more imaginative, but started with the use of electronics. This, it doesn't, I don't know offhand, it doesn't really recall In a Silent Way, even though it's dedicated to that era. It's more modern, it's more of a modern fusion-y kind of album. But this is pretty good. I mean, when it comes to fusion groups that I'm not real all fond of, I would much rather hear this than like a Chick Corea's Electric Band or something like that. So that's pretty good, but it's still not, Isham where I want to hear him. And over the years, he's put together, or his record companies put together samplers, and I bought these even though I have all the pieces anyway. Windham Hill sampler, which came out, I think that's out of print now, and Pure Mark Isham, which is later day Windham Hill, more recent compilations. The Pure series, again, is something that multiple artists on the Windham Hill label have. The Pure, and those are all compilations of theirs. I have a bunch of things to show, but there's one soundtrack, and to me, if I could only have 2 Isham albums that were in the soundtrack world, the first one would be that film music album I showed you, but this would be the other one, The Beast. I never saw the movie. I don't think I've seen any of the movies he did soundtracks for. Apparently, this is a movie about war, a fairly realistic, ugly movie about war. And it's a 50-minute soundtrack divided basically into 2 very long tunes. And again, it doesn't sound like a soundtrack. If somebody put this on, they'd say, wow, that's a really intense album musically. There's a female vocalist doing like a world vocal thing, wordless, and it's absolutely Middle Eastern sounding, absolutely beautiful and haunting. And unfortunately, a lot of soundtracks, and this is one of them, don't have musicians' credits on them. So we know Isham did the soundtrack, and there's a thank you that Isham wrote to people that are musicians, so I have to assume that they're the musicians on the album. David Torn is one of them. You hear a lot of processed guitar on that. I'm assuming is probably David Torn. Kurt Workman is a drummer percussionist that plays with Mark Isham on many of these other albums that I've showed of his. So I'm assuming that Kurt Workman is doing the percussion on there. And there's a bunch of other people whose names I can't even pronounce that sound Middle Eastern to me, and probably one of them is the vocalist on there. And others there's some additional musicians, and I can't pick out, instruments that he may not have played, or I know what Isham plays in terms of instrumentation, but there's a lot going on in the soundtrack, and this is a hard one to get. But the only reason I bought it was when did I say this came out? 88. There weren't a lot of Mark Isham solo albums out, and again, I was hesitant to buy a movie soundtrack, but I was so in love with his first few things that he did, and I think I only at that point had maybe 3 albums of his, and it's just like I don't know anything about this. I'm going to pick it up, and it's good because, like I said, most of the soundtracks have these little 1-minute excerpts and a minute and a half tunes, and they're not long enough to get into anything. This is done in a sweet kind of fashion. Like there's basically 2 25-minute pieces where all the music fuses together, and you don't know where one piece that may have been used in one section of the film starts and ends, and where another piece that may have been used in a different section of the film starts and ends. Fantastic. This is really a haunting, powerful, darkest thing he's ever done. And I'm glad I bought that. That's one that went out of print awful fast, as do most movie soundtracks. Most of these movie soundtracks, I have not made any attempt to keep up anymore. Most of the movie soundtracks come out, and they're full priced, obviously, when they come out, and you don't know anything about them to pick them up. And if you wait at the right time, they tend to go out of print very fast, unless it's a huge hit movie, or you get a Grammy award or something like that as a soundtrack. Most soundtracks tend to go out of print very quickly. And when they go out of print, that's when you can generally pick them up, still new and sealed, at a reasonable price. And that's when I would try to strike to get them. But I've got to show you how. And the funny thing is the more I look here, the more I realize I have more albums here that I haven't shown. Here's what Mark Isham did in 1992 alone, which accounts for why at that point there was 5-year gaps between his solo albums. Okay, 1992 he does a soundtrack to a movie called The Public Eye. Now he does the whole soundtrack. It's not just on occasion there will be a soundtrack to a movie where he just contributes 10 or 15 minutes worth of music. I'm talking about like full-length soundtracks where he does all of the instrumental music. So in 92 he does this called The Public Eye. Also in 1992 he does this soundtrack to this TV movie called Sketch Artist. I might have seen this one. I'm not sure. Is it a made-for-TV movie? Also in 92 he does a soundtrack to Of Mice and Men, theatrical movie. Also in 92, A River Runs Through It, and this is one that's still very much available because this was a big movie and it got an Academy Award nomination for Best Score, or did it win the award? I think it was just nominated. But this is still available because it was a fairly big movie, and it got the nomination. Also 92. And this movie, which probably a lot of people, I didn't see this, Cool World, an animated movie, he did the soundtrack for that too. Also 1992. That's an incredible amount of work, and you can see how popular he is with filmmakers, and how and why he doesn't come out with solo albums. A couple other things that I have of his. Like I said, there was a time, oh, damn it, here's Castaglia. This is another solo album by his that I missed, and I thought I didn't think was in this track. Now, was this for Virgin? I think this was his Virgin era. Yes, 1988. So this was his first album for Virgin. This is a solo album, not a soundtrack, in 1988. And the other one that I showed that was just called Mark Isham was on Virgin in 1990, and that's the one where he had the vocal songs, and it didn't sell that well, and I guess that was, Virgin said, well, either sell records or we're going to dump you, and they dumped him. And that's not a direction I would want to see him continue in, having to bring vocalists on anyway. Okay, so what are we up to? I can't find a year on this, guys, and I'm trying desperately to... 1997. This was a thriller that was fairly well known. He did the soundtrack to Kiss the Girls, a Morgan Freeman movie, Ashley Judd. He did that. This was 97. You can see why, why this guy doesn't have time to do solo albums. 1990, movie called Love at Large, which he did the soundtrack for. And because I'm so unprepared, I actually have to get up and go off camera for a second. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. 1994, movie you may have heard of, Nell. This is a pretty big movie. He did the soundtrack for that in 94. Quiz Show. I think this is 94 also. I located the dates on all of these, and now that I'm looking, I can't find them on the discs. Yeah, 94. So here's two soundtracks here in 94. He also did a movie called Fire in the Sky, which was supposedly based on true events, and that was, I want to say, I don't know when that was, early 90s, and I have that soundtrack, and it's not here. And that was based on supposedly true events of somebody who had seen a flying saucer landing, or claims was abducted by aliens. This is a really good soundtrack. 2000, Rules of Engagement, another movie I've never seen. This is interesting because the filmmaker was a fan of Vapor Drawings, Mark's very first solo album, and when he was making the movie, there was this particularly regal sounding track on that album called On the Threshold of Liberty. And the filmmaker kept on using that theme kind of as a mock soundtrack when he was making the movie, which a lot of filmmakers do. A lot of filmmakers, before they have a soundtrack written for a film, have a very specific idea and have some existing music that they like to use as a demonstration, sometimes for the, often for the person that's going to be the soundtrack composer. And this guy was using the original version of On the Threshold of Liberty from Mark's first album, Vapor Drawings, and then said, hey, why don't I just ask him to do the soundtrack? And a lot of what he does on the soundtrack are kind of variations on that track. So if you like that track, which I do, it's very interesting, and I don't know how they got the rights to it, but they also put on the original track from the Windham Hill album, On the Threshold of Liberty, all the way at the end. So you can hear all these variations of it. Of course, you have to be up for listening to a lot of variations on the same theme. And then there's other music that he wrote mixed in. But again, just goes to show how much soundtrack work he was doing. 2000, Galapagos. He did. This is a really good soundtrack. I only found out about this by going onto his website. And this is a pretty good. It's not terribly long, but this is one of those things that works on its own. Some of the soundtrack stuff, like I said, the tracks are incredibly short and don't give you enough time to get into. This gives you enough time. The tracks are short, but they really sound like, for the most part, pieces that aren't just thrown together on a soundtrack, but are nice little things that work on their own. So that's one of the better ones in terms of soundtracks, I think. Another pop culture movie, Body Shots, which I don't know anything about. I know it was a big movie. He did this in 1999. This has a big hit single on it. This is a Moby, Body Rock, performed by Moby, which is a song I particularly can't stand. It's one of those things that I can't even take 10 seconds of that song. Thankfully, it's the first thing on the album. And there's about maybe 25 minutes worth of Mark Isham music on the rest of it. Kind of more in a techno vein. Not where I would start with his stuff at all. This is strictly for demonstration reasons that I even show that. 1998, he's doing Afterglow. Again, the entire soundtrack. This is a big budget movie. Fire in the Sky, I want to say, I think was 92, which I don't have here. In 95, he did The Net, the Sandra Bullock movie. Again, something I've never seen. But, he's big time. He's big time Hollywood writer, and, even though nothing I've said probably tells you much about the music, he's an incredibly imaginative writer. Very hard to pin him down. He can play in the jazz, mainstream jazz field. He can do the new age music very well, obviously, like he did on his actual first solo album, Vapor Drawings. But he's got such a wide palette to draw from, fusion, and he's got a particularly fine ear for orchestral sounds, even if they're not played by orchestras. Now, he does have very large bands playing on his albums, soundtrack albums, especially the big budget Hollywood ones. And he's got incredible ear for colors and orchestras, but he can also pull that off on a solo album just by using synthesizers. He's got a very fine ear for combining that, and it's no big surprise that he's as successful as he is as a soundtrack composer. I just wish he did more solo albums. And again, that's just a sampling of his soundtrack work. And if you don't know him, but you think it's the kind of thing, I'd say start with Vapor Drawings and that Windham Hill, and I hope the Windham Hill film music and Vapor Drawings are both in print. They might not be. But that film music, the one that actually has 3 different soundtracks on it that was on Windham Hill, is an incredible album too. And if you didn't know it was written for a film, you wouldn't know it. A lot of the ones I showed you, again, have shorter pieces on them that are film soundtracks. And, you have to really be a fan of his to listen to it, because the pieces don't get a chance to develop often. But the film music is incredible. The Beast, if you ever see that, and you think you can appreciate dark music, that is... I'm so glad I picked that up. That was one of those things that came and went so fast. If you blink, you miss it, because I don't think the film was successful at all. Okay, guys, I don't know... I wanted to mention this. Prior to... a couple other things, actually. I had shows on my albums that I have that I missed the CD edition. There's a Juan Martin album, a guitarist Juan Martin, that he did called Painter and Sound. That Mark Isham was the only other musician that played on the album. And it was almost like a Colette album, not in name, but Mark Isham contributed a lot to. That was done in '86. Again, I don't know where the guy finds the time. That was good. But Mark also had this group just prior, the early '80s, prior to 1983, when he started his solo career with Vapor Drawings. He had this group 87. They did 2 albums. And the primary guys in the group were Mark Isham and Peter Maunu, M-A-U-N-U, Maunu. I never knew exactly how to pronounce his name. On the first album, it was primarily those 2 guys, with a bassist. Patrick O'Hearn was actually the bassist of the group on their first album, though he left before the second album. And I thought those were really fine. So those came out in the early '80s, went out of print very, very quickly, and ended up getting re-released. I was kind of disappointed in them. I'll tell you what they sound like. They sound like a synth pop band, like a British synth pop band from the early '80s, minus the vocals. I guess what they tried to do is do instrumental music that was as poppy and accessible as regular pop music was at the time, but it really doesn't work. It doesn't sound good. It has that kind of hollow, empty synthesizer sound that a lot of those bands had at the time, and the tracks were just too short, and it really sounded like, it could be, I don't know, like a Human League or something like that with the vocals removed. Didn't really work, but the musicians were really great. And one guy that appeared, and he may still even work with Isham now, I'm not sure, but appeared on a bunch of soundtracks and was part of that group 87, was this guy, Peter Maunu. My guess is that Peter he's an LA musician, I'm very sure. And I bet you he's a studio musician. I just had that feeling. And he only got one chance to record a solo album, and this is it. This is for the Narada label. I know Carm will know this label. And this was a label, again, that was around at only exclusively at the beginning of the New Age thing. So that would have been the mid-'80s to maybe just the early '90s. And in 1990, Peter came out with his only solo album. I'm sure even to this day he hasn't done another one. And it's called Warm Sound in a Gray Field. This is a great album. For a lot of years, I didn't buy this when it first came out in 90, but I probably picked it up in, I don't know, 92, 93, 94, somewhere in there, a few years after. And it was because I had heard his guitar on Mark Isham's film music albums, and this is even before I picked up the Group 87 stuff, where it turns out he was a full-fledged band member. And Peter played a lot on the various soundtracks that Mark Isham did. And boy, is this a nice... This is very accessible, but this is a nice, lush... I wouldn't even say it's guitar-based. He's a guitarist, and lots of guitar in there. But it's more of a musical experience, kind of, just like a lot of the New Age artists that were primarily keyboard players. I don't know if you hone in so much on the keyboards as you do the overall experience of listening to the music. The nice thing about this is Peter is not trying to prove how fast he can play or try to get a solo in every 3 seconds kind of thing. This is an absolute classic of its kind, probably one of the best things Narada ever put out, and it's such a shame that Peter did not do any more solo albums. Or if he did recently, they would be self-released things, which I would definitely check out. But if you find this was only in print for a few years, but I used to see a lot of used copies around. Thankfully, I got mine new on Narada Mystique 1990, Warm Sound in a Gray Field. Man, this is a nice album. This is a nice album. Nothing to be ashamed of in this, and not dated sounding at all. Very lush. I'm not even sure who else plays on this. It's primarily Peter doing his thing, and I would be surprised if Mark Isham didn't do an appearance on this, but I'm not seeing it in the booklet. That's fantastic. If you get the chance to buy this, especially at a decent price, go for it. You won't be sorry. And I'm kind of hoping that not only am I going to see Mark do some more solo albums, but also Peter will as well. Okay, guys. Sunday night, fairly late, so I wasn't even going to do a video tonight, but you know, I did. What can I tell you? I got to stop doing these every day. But whenever you see this, I hope everything's going well, or you know, in any way this may have cheered up your day or whatever, guys. Thanks for watching, all of you that are putting in a strong effort into watching videos that are far too long, and I didn't mean for this one to go as long again either. But I appreciate all the kind comments and the words and the fact that you guys are watching. And you'll see me all too soon. So I hope everybody has a great week. Peace, love, and joy, as my friend Carm says. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.